Good morning. I can't hear you.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I use the phone. You can see me if you
Oh,
want.
really?
I don't know. It wasn't working for some reason, but
It happens.
I'm not sure if anyone else is joining. I know Rosh Hashanah is not the easiest time, especially if it's late. So let's give them 2 minutes, and 9:20 we'll get started.
No problem. I was very happy you decided 9:15. I think it's the first time in like, I don't know how long that I actually managed to sleep an extra hour.
Lucky you. Okay, I was in my office.
I don't know. I get up at 4:30 in the morning anyway. Normally, that's like with slichot, there's no choice.
Right. Sure.
Slichot, davening, daf. That's like boom, boom, boom.
Okay, here we are. Hanan made it. Very good.
Yes. Excellent.
So let's get started. I have to finish by 10, so we're gonna move through this. It's a busy day, as we all know. So today's daf is daf vav, and we actually are up to the top line, the first word on daf vav. So, we're gonna continue. This is very thematic. This is a very difficult masechet, partly because there's not a lot of agadita, so it's like business after business. But it continues. It really builds on itself, and so it's a great masechet to learn. I learned it in 12th grade, which was a good year. I think that's when your brain is at peak power. So it's all downhill since, right? But you're muted.
Depends whose brain you're talking about, but yeah. Okay.
That could be too. In any event, Amar Rava. So remember, we were talking about the question of, really, the big question here is muktzah. But remember, muktzah here is very different, though it's related to what we talked about in Shabbos. Right? Shabbos, we talked a lot about muktzah, about moving things, about touching things. Here we're talking, I'd say, a little bit more philosophically about, what's considered prepared. And of course, the practical question comes with an egg, but there's many other ramifications. So that we dealt with the egg that was laid on the day, and whether you eat it the day it was laid. Then we moved on to talk about what about one day to the next? What's the relationship between Shabbat and Yom Tov, which is a very big question. 2 days of Yom Tov if you're in Chutz La'aretz. 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Of course, it's good to talk about an Erev Rosh Hashanah. And we talked about Rav, which basically said that you can eat an egg from one day of Yom Tov to the next, but not from one day of Rosh Hashanah to the next, and not from Shabbos to Yom Tov, for Yom Tov to Shabbos. Today we get on to the next question. Amar Rava, what about a mate? A person has an obligation to bury a dead relative or a dead mate mitzvah, and the dead person is there, the corpse is there. If it's B'Yom Tov Rishon, if it's, say, the first day of Sukkot, let's say, we'll put aside Rosh Hashanah for a second, then you shouldn't touch that dead body. It's considered to be melacha to dig a grave. That's binyan, right? You can't dig up, it's charisha, it's plowing, it's building. You can't dig a grave, you can't cover the grave. But yitasku bo amimim, you should let the nations, the non-Jews, deal with it. So you can't do anything for it.
What?
Meaning you can't touch the dead body. So
no, I understand, but is that kavod to the mate to have non-Jews prepare the body or something, or?
Well, it's talking about this time not necessarily preparing, but actually burying the body. But obviously, if it's done with a respectful way, you can't do it, but you can let others take care of it.
You supervise them, or?
Perhaps, yeah, you can supervise. You can't touch the body. You could supervise it. There is actually, I'm not so clear about where we poskin, to be honest with you, about this. There's a debate about whether this just applies to like the digging of the grave, Or how about handling the body? How about cleaning? Well, cleaning might be malacha, but putting on the clothes, let's say, tachrichem, right, which is just muktzah. So the Mishnah Berurah, I think, talks about it. I don't remember what he says. Yes or no?
Non-Jews can't do tahara, can they?
No, they cannot do tahara.
So I don't,
But I guess, again, that's not, but tahara is not necessarily ma'akiv. I mean, so your question is, should you delay the burial? I guess a lot of it depends on the condition of the body and what, remember, in those times, and we said this yesterday,
Well,
right?
I understand, but still preparing the body is like a big part of the burial.
So there is a discussion in the late Achronim as to whether this applies to things that are just muktzah, right? Like touching a body. If you can move a body, that's an isser muktzah. It's not an isser of, it's not an isser of malacha.
No,
But either way,
okay.
If it's made by Yom Tov Sheni, now if you have a dead body, the Bach takes on the word made, but it's on Yom Tov Sheni, Yitasku bo Yisrael, then even a Jew can do it. You could bury the person regularly. And afilu shnei yomim tovim shel Rosh Hashanah. This is true not just on Sukkot or Pesach, even on Rosh Hashanah. Masha'en came Beitzah, which is of course not the case, not the halacha, by the egg. At the egg, we said the second day of Rosh Hashanah is prohibited just like the first day, unlike Sukkot or Pesach. But by a mate, it would both be permitted. Okay. Why? We'll have to see. That's Rava. Nahardai Amri, Nahardai were Amuraim, who lived in Naharda, right? Naharda is in Bavel. They said, no way, we think even Beitzah, you can eat it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Even the egg, you don't really have to worry about this whole question that Rav had yesterday, that Rosh Hashanah is one long holiday. Because Dema Daitach, what is your concern about Rosh Hashanah? That Dilma Ma'avle Le'elo. Remember, the whole concern yesterday was that they're gonna come to do the karban. They're gonna do the wrong karban on the 30th day, and therefore we have to make a takana and add on 2 days because maybe Elo will be me'ubar, right? Meaning Elo will have 30 days, and it's Rosh Hashanah is not till the 31st day. It never happens. It's really impractical. Ha'amar Chinna Barkana Marav Nimot Ezra ve'elach. From the days of Ezra and on, Lo Matzino Elo me'ubar. We never have Elul Mu'ubar. And Rashi says, well, maybe once in a while, but it's very, very uncommon. And so therefore, this whole theoretical concern about Elul really does not seem to be that valid, says Nahardai, and we disagree with the whole halacha, and we say that you can have Rosh Hashanah basically is the same as every other Chag, meaning we do keep 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, but we don't keep it as one long day according to them. We keep it as Suffolk Yuma, like Sukkot or Pesach, and therefore what's permitted on the second day of Pesach, including burying a dead body, but also eating the egg, is permitted on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Amar Marzutra, now says Marzutra, okay, Lo Amran, that on the second day of Yom Tif, you can bury, or Rosh Hashanah, you can bury a mate, Ella T'ishtahi. It's only if it's been sitting there for a while. It's been sitting out, meaning the body is going bad. Right? Remember, they didn't have refrigeration, right? And they lived in very hot places. So when someone died, unfortunately, there would be worms. There would be, anyways. It was very unpleasant. Avalo ishtahi. If it wasn't there for a long time, let's say the person died the night before, or it's in a condition where the body's preserved, then mashinalei. Then you should wait till after Yom Tov. So the whole heter to bury a dead person, I guess, on second day of Yom Tov really is only if it's a practical need, but if it's not, you should delay. That's how he paskin, which will of course have huge implications for today. You guys hear me, right? Because today we have refrigeration, right? So it almost never makes sense to have to bury someone on the specific day. You could wait, right? However, don't get too worried. Says Rav Ashi Amar, no, that's wrong, and this is how we paskin. Afagav de lo ishtahi nami lo mashinalei. Even if the body's not going to be delayed and go bad, you don't wait. You don't wait to bury someone. You bury them on the second day of Yom Tov. Why? My time, because Yom Tov Sheni the Gabi mate kichol shavi Rabbanan. Rabbanan basically said in regards to burying a dead body, Yom Tov Sheni is like chol. There's nothing. It's not like you could do it if you have to do it. You don't have to worry about Yom Tov. Basically, forget about Yom Tov. Treat it like Tuesday. Or, like a Tuesday, it's not Yom Tov.
You can do any melacha, driving, going outside the tikkun, or, anything related, if it's l'tzorech hakavura.
On Yom Tov, there's no tchum.
on Yom Tov Sheni. We're not there yet. Don't do this at home.
No, I think that.
Okay. One second. Let's finish the Gemara. That's what Rav Ashi says. Rav Ashi says what you just said, Chana. Yeah, that you can do whatever you need to. You can drive to the cemetery. You can do whatever you want. Says Rav Ashi, where am I? Afilo, they changed the gersa to lemegad leglima. You can even weave a coat for the body, for the person. Right? Let's say you don't have tachrichim, or not necessarily you don't even have tachrichim, but you want to do something even nicer. You can weave it on Yom Tif, which is obviously very secondary to burying the body. That's permitted, and even lemegas leasa. Let's say you wanted a flower arrangement on the coffin, right? Or now, of course, part of the reason they had flower arrangements is the Mercer in Sanhedrin, I think, is because unfortunately they would smell, and so you wanted to have flowers to distract from the smell, right? But we use flowers, of course. It's very, very customary. I don't know if it's Jewish or non-Jewish or every culture, right? There's flowers somehow get associated with funerals, and so even if you want to cut down flowers on Yom Tif, that's fine, because it's a tzorach of the mate. Obviously, it's not critical if you bury the person without flowers, but that would be permitted. And so what you said, Hanan, would be true, that according to this, it would be okay to drive to the funeral or to, do things like that. However, don't get there yet. Says Ravina, Amar Ravina, a couple generations after Rav Ashi, ha'idna, but nowadays meaning 3rd century in Bavel, T'ika chavrai, they had this terrible problem with the chavrai. Chavrai, unfortunately, does not mean your friends, right? It was this sect of people in Persia. I don't actually know what they correspond to in reality, but they are mentioned throughout the Gemara. They were these, people say the Taliban, but I guess I don't know if that's the right thing. So they were this violent sect that were very religious and Zoroastrian, and they basically enslaved almost. They were like Cossacks, right? They made the Jewish people work for them, and they controlled them. And it turned out they enslaved them essentially, but they would give them off for Yom Tif because, they said, this is our religion, we can't work on Yom Tif. But the problem is that if they see you going out and driving to the funeral on the 2nd day of Rosh Hashanah, right, what they're going to say is that, you can work today. So they're going to draft you to work for them. They're going to force you to work for them. And so because nowadays, again, in the 3rd century in Bavel, 4th century maybe, it would end up having this negative consequence. We no longer, says Ravina, do this. Okay? So we no longer allow, this is like me in work, I have it, Lahavdil, it's not the same, we're like I got to take off the 2nd day of Shavuot, Simchas Torah, right? And they're like, what do you mean? All the Jews are here on Simchas Torah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
So I would say Lahavdil, because obviously this is a whole different level of concern, and they would really force you to work, and so therefore, said Ravina, you can't do it. Now, Tosfos here says, very problematically for us, says Rabbeinu Tam, that we really have a similar situation nowadays. Rabbeinu Tam goes through a couple of reasons why. Partly says because...
Which photo are you referring to here?
Tosfos is V'ha'idna, but he goes through a few different opinions here. And really, the Rabbeinu Tam says nowadays it's Asr. Tosfos first quotes an opinion saying, well, remember, again, I don't want to get too distracted because we're really going to have to finish, but the presumed is that we don't have the chavrai anymore, so you can bury people on the 2nd day of Yom Tov, right? We discussed a couple days ago that when there's a takana, you can't uproot the takana without having another minyan. So Tosfos first explains why that's not true. That you can, when there's a gzeira because of a specific reason, and the reason goes away, you can get rid of the gzeira. So Tosfos says it should be permissible to bury on the 2nd day. But Rabbeinu Tam says that we don't do it. And Rabbeinu Tam, all the way at the end of Tosfos, says something very fascinating. 4 lines from the bottom. If you want, I'm happy to read it together. 4 lines from the bottom of this Tosfot. Od Amar Rabbeinu Tam. Does everyone got that?
I see.
Says Rabbeinu Tam, the Bisman Hazeh, that nowadays, Nami Yesh Yehudim Shehem Meshubadim L'Malchut. There are Jews who are basically enslaved to the king, meaning they're serfs. And they have to do Lasot Melachat Kigon Lekabel Hamas Latasek B'tzarcheim. Right, you're the court doctor. Or maybe that's mutter, but you're the court, appointee. You collect taxes. You're a public servant, right? And you say to the government, I can't work on Monday because it's Rosh Hashanah. But says Tosfot, Hilkach im yirushi et asku lasot melacha b'meit. If the government sees that people are working to bury dead people, yichofu otam lasot melacha l'malchut. They're going to force you to work. And therefore, there's an equivalent situation today, says Rabbeinu Tam, in his day, that you can't allow people to work on second day of Chag, even to bury someone, because it's going to lead to this terrible situation where they're going to force someone to work. Now, you could say that it's not true in America today, right? Because the government's not forcing, you're a federal judge, you say, I got to take off the second day of Sukkot, right? They're not going to force you to work, right? So
Are you
perhaps
sure?
it's different. Well,
I mean, in New York State, we're protected, but I don't think that it's if you're in Mississippi that you'll be able to do it.
Right. So that's one issue. The other issue that's brought up by the Rishonim and Rav Moshe talks about this at length is the issue of zilzul. The fact that Tosfos did not mention that yet. Earlier he does mention that, but that in fact when people are mechal Yom Tov Sheni and they don't take it seriously, Tosfos talks about the possibility that you want to be stricter about it so that you don't end up in a situation where nobody takes it seriously. And so there are many poskim who poskim that today you should not bury a person on the second day of Yom Tov. You cannot be mechal Yom Tov. There are those who disagree, and I think the Sephardim do it, and Ashkenazim don't do it. That's a very broad statement, but anyways, it's a very interesting halacha because unfortunately it happens, right? Of course, people die on the second day of Yom Tov or the first day of Yom Tov, and they have to be buried. But anyways, this is a very practical halacha, but we're going to continue for now. Ravina, now right back to the Gemara. Ravina aviyativ kamei Ravashi. Ravina was sitting in front of Ravashi b'shnei Yom Tovim shel Rosh Hashanah. It was the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah that year was Thursday, Friday. Of course, that's a 3-day Yom Tov. Unlike us who complained about a 3-day Yom Tov, they really complained about 3-day Yom Tov because they couldn't cook. They had no refrigeration. They couldn't, it was terrible, right? So they had a real difficult time. And Chaz Yadavi Otziv. Ravashi walked by Ravina to say Good Yom Tov, and he saw that he was very sad. He was sitting there depressed. Chamerlei, Amayat Sivat Mar. What are you so worried about? It's Rosh Hashanah. Amarlei, I forgot to put my Erev Tavshilin. Right? I still have this problem sometimes, right? You forgot to do the Erev Tavshilin. It's Thursday. I can cook on Thursday for Thursday. I could cook on Friday for Friday, but I have no way to make food for Shabbos. Because you can't cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. This is the next parak of this Masechet. But we're going to get there in a couple of weeks. So it says Rava, Amrlei said to him, Velotas Maridna, I don't get it. Why can't you make an Erev Tavshilin on Yom Tov? You can't make an Erev on Yom Tov, but why don't you make a condition, right? Milo Amar Rava, didn't Rava say, we're going to have this later, you can make an Erev Tavshilin on one day of Yom Tov, meaning the first day for the second day, and make it T'nai. What's your T'nai going to be? Look, I'm taking this Erev today on Thursday, the first day of Yom Tov. If today is Yom Tov, then my Erev means nothing. And then tomorrow's not Yom Tov, I could cook on Friday for Shabbos because it's Chol HaMoed, right? If today is not Yom Tov, then it's Erev Yom Tov. And tomorrow is Yom Tov, but I'm making an Erev Tavshilin on Thursday so that on Friday I can cook for Shabbos. And so why can't you just do that? It's what you're allowed to do it for Yom Tov. Why can't you do it for Rosh Hashanah? And so he said back to him, Amar Lei, well, that's because it's only Yom Tov. He said that about 2 days of Sukkot or Pesach. But Shnei Yom Tovim Shel Rosh Hashanah Mi Amar, isn't that stricter? So, like Rob said with the egg. So Ravashi said back to him, why is it stricter? Nahardai said, you don't even have to worry about the egg. Well, Amri Nahardai Af Beitzah Muteret. Amar Lei said to him, unfortunately, Rav Mordechai Beferish Amar Limar, the Lo Savr Lahad Nahardai. We don't pass like Nahardai. And so therefore Rosh Hashanah is a separate category from other Yom Tov Sheni, and on Rosh Hashanah it's considered, at least according to this psak, to be one long day, and you cannot make a t'nai from one day of Rosh Hashanah to the second day. And so basically I'm in real trouble. I have no food. Hopefully he can get invited out, but maybe at a family, but he had no food or no hot food and no ability to cook for Shabbos after 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. So it was a very difficult situation. Okay, that's that sugya. Next sugya we're going to get to is what about, remember we've been talking about eggs for a long time. What about chicks? Says the Beitzah, says the Gemara, the Beitzah, Itzmar. Efroach shenolad b'Yom Tov. Let's say your egg hatches on Yom Tov, right? Not your chicken lays an egg, but you have an egg that, I don't know how long eggs lay, 2 weeks maybe, a week, maybe someone knows here, but some amount of time, okay, it's an egg, let's say a week, and it cracks open and hatches on Yom Tov. And you want to eat this little baby chick. Maybe it was a delicacy. It sounds very disgusting to me, but you have to shecht it. It's a little bird. But you want to have that for lunch. right? So can you have an Efroach that was Nolad, that was born on Yom Tov? So Rav says, Aser, no. And Shmuel, V'tem Rabbi Yochanan says it's Mutter. Why? Rav Amar Aser, because Mutter. What do you mean? When Yom Tov started, the egg was not, the what's it called? The
Chicken.
chick, thank you. The chick was not born yet. And so it's not there. It's not prepared. It's muktzah. And Shmuel V'tem Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mutter. Why? Because they say a great svar. Now remember, when you have a chick inside an egg, right? It can't really be eaten because it's a living thing, right? You hatch an egg, right? So if you crack open an egg and you find a dead chick inside of that, or even a live chick, right? You can't eat that until it comes out of the egg, until you can do shchita, right? And so since at the time that the egg opened up and the chick was born, it permitted itself where it was previously prohibited. Now you can do shchita and you can be able to eat it. So since Rashi says amigo, since basically it became mutter on Yom Tov, it can also become mutter from muktzah on Yom Tov. So through the fact that it became permitted, let's read the words. Ha'il umatir atzmo b'shchita, since it permitted itself, because now you can do shchita, which you could not have done before, it also becomes permitted, and basically the muktzah goes away and it becomes muchan. Now, Amri Lei, Rav Kahana, Rav Asi, the Rav. So Rav, remember, says that you can't eat the chick. So Rav Kahana, Rav Asi said to Rav, Chima ben zele egel shmula b'yom tov. I don't get it. Everybody knows. Now, it's not so clear how everybody knows, right? But everybody knows that if a cow gives birth on Yom Tov, you can eat that baby, right? You can eat a baby egel. We call it veal. No, I don't think we call it veal, but a brand new, like same day, egel on Yom Tov. Why is it any different? Why, if a cow gives birth to a calf, can you eat the calf on Yom Tov? But you're telling me that when when an egg gives birth to a chicken, which is, again, you can see there's differences, right? You're not allowed to eat the chicken. Why is that any different? The calf is born to the world, and you're allowed to eat it. The chicken's born, what do you call it? A chick is born to the world, you're allowed to eat it. So why is that any different? They asked him. Amar Lu, he said once, that's very different. Because muchan agav imo b'shchita. And again, if you have a mother, a cow that's pregnant, remember we had this all through Chulin. You shech the mother, you could eat the kid as a ben pakua. Remember, right? So that it's not like you couldn't eat it. The chick you couldn't eat it was inside the egg. You couldn't eat it inside the egg. It's a living thing that wasn't shechted. Okay, but what about being chima bein tel egel shalom ben treifa? But what about if the mother was a treifa? Now, again, we're assuming Rashi says that you're allowed to eat an egel that's born from a treifa on Yom Tov, right? Because no one ever said you can't. But you couldn't eat the mother. The mother's a treifa. And if you shechted the mother, then you can't eat the egel inside of it either, because the egel is part of the mother. So it's part of a treifa. Until it's born, you can't eat the egel. So it was prohibited to eat the mother. It's prohibited to eat the egel with the mother. Once it's born, you're allowed to eat it. Why is that different than the egg? And he was shatak. Rav didn't answer. Shatak Rav. Rav doesn't disagree. Rav didn't go back from his opinion. He didn't have a clear answer. Amar Rabba v'tem Rav Yosef. My time is shatak Rav. Why would Rav quiet? Why did Rav explain that the reason you can eat an egel that was born from a mother that was a treifa is because the mother was not muktzah. Of course you can't eat the mother. She's a treifa. But you can feed her to your dogs, right? You could have killed, you don't have to shecht it, right? You could have killed the mother on Yom Tov and fed her to your animals, because animals have to eat on Yom Tov, right? So there's no prohibition of doing that. And you could have fed the baby to the dogs also. You can't eat the baby, remember, if you shecht the mother as a treifa. But you can feed it to your animals, unlike, right? So it's muchan. So lema loho muchan agav imo leklavim. Since the egel, the baby, was muchan through its mother because you could have fed it to the animals, to the dogs. So why didn't he answer that? Amalei Abaya. Abaya said, 1 second. That's really not a good answer. Because look, turn the page. Hashta. Look, if something that is muchan la'adam, right? You take something that is totally edible for a person when Yom Tov starts, like a pumpkin, right? That was our case before. And people take pumpkins and they cook them and they make pumpkin soup, right? It's normal to eat a pumpkin. But it's not considered muchan l'klavim. If you decide on Yom Tov, you know what? I'm not really hungry for that pumpkin, but my dog is very hungry. let me cut it up and give it to the dog. You're not allowed to do that, right? It's not, and we had this mission before, but we're going to have it many times. You're allowed to cut up a gourd and feed it to your animal, and you can cut up a nevela and give it to your dogs, a carcass, right, that's not edible for humans, and feed it to your dog on Yom Tif. But says Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Im lo hayta nevela me'erev Shabbat asura. This is talking about Shabbos, right? If the animal was not dead when Shabbos started, it's asur. Meaning if it was a live animal and then it died on Yom Tif or Shabbos, you can't cut it up and feed it to your animal, because when Yom Tif started, it was prohibited. Now, if it was alive when Yom Tif started, it was a regular animal. Every animal is considered to be mukhan because I could shecht it and eat it on Yom Tif, right? But if an animal is mukhan, the fact that it's mukhan for me as a human means that it's still not mukhan for a dog, right? So you see, l'chishenu min mukhan. But so you see for sure that if you're mukhan la'adam, it's not considered mukhan l'klavim. So now think about the meat. The animal, the egel, you could have shechted it, because even though it's a treifa, you could have killed it and fed it to your dogs. And you could have fed the baby inside of it to the dogs, but you couldn't eat it yourself, right? So mukhan l'klavim, the case where it's mukhan l'klavim, havi mukhan la'adam, would that be considered mukhan for a person? The fact that now it's born on Yom Tif and you can shecht it and eat it, it's still muksa. Because when Yom Tif started, or Shabbos started, it was not considered suitable for a human. And you see that the fact that it's suitable for a dog is not enough. That's wrong. Amalei In, he said, no, you're wrong. It's correct to say what you just said. That mukhan la'adam, if it's something that's set aside and useful for a person, lo havi mukhan l'klavim, because you don't give away your good human stuff and feed it to your dogs, right? Now people today might do that, but in those days they didn't do it, right? You wouldn't take something of high value that can be fed for a person and give it to an animal. So mukhan la'adam, lo havi mukhan l'klavim. Dechazi leila inish, that which is suitable for a person, lo sharzi leila klavim. You're not going to throw it away to your dog. But that which is mukhan l'klavim, like this animal that's a treifa, if it changes, havi mukhan la'adam, the daita, the inish, akol midi dechazlei. People are very expansive in their ideas. They think, sure, there's nothing to eat today, but you never know what's going to show up tomorrow. And so this animal, which is a treifa, I can't eat the mother, and I can't check the mother. I can check the mother, but I can't then eat the fetus inside. But if it gives birth, I can check the fetus and eat it. And so your das is that it won't be muksa for you. And so that's why it would be a different case, so that it's mutter to eat, right? It's clear. It's mutter to eat the fetus or the baby of a cow, where it's not mutter, according to Rav, to eat the chick that came out of the egg. Now, Tani Kavate de Rav and Tani Kavate de Shmuel, there's a Beitzah that supports each one. V'idem Rabbi Yochanan. Tani Kavate de Rav, this is a quote from the Beitzah. Egel shenolad b'Yom Tov. If a calf is born on Yom Tov, mutter. You're allowed to shech that calf and eat it on Yom Tov. But if Rosh shenolad b'Yom Tov, asur. But like Rav said, a chick that's born on Yom Tov is asur. Says the Beitzah, ma hafresh ben zeh lezeh. What's the difference? Because zeh, the calf, is muchan agavimo b'shchita. It is considered to be edible because its mother could have been shechted and you could have eaten it with the mother. But zeh, muchan gavi imo, right? Obviously, the chick there's no way to eat a chick that's in an egg, right? You can't. I mean, you could crack an egg, but you can't make it come out, right? And so if you crack the egg and the chick is there and dead, you obviously can't eat it, right? So this is not muchan agavimo l'shchita. Tani Kavati de Shmuel became Rabbi Yochanan. There's a Beitzah supporting Shmuel. This Beitzah says Egel shnolad b'Yom Tov mutar, which everyone agrees, right? That a calf born on Yom Tov can be shechted and eaten. But this Beitzah continues and says Efroach shnolad b'Yom Tov is mutar, but a chick that's born on Yom Tov, hatched on Yom Tov, is mutar. And my time, as we said on Amud Aleph, because the Egel is mutar zemuchan agavimo, because it's already prepared through its mother. And zeh matir atzmo b'shchita. And the chick, because it became something that you can now shecht once it was born, that becoming mutar spreads, and it becomes mutar also from the prohibition of muksa. And that's why it's prohibited. Tanaravam. Next, one more case. We got Efroach Shenol. Well, no, this is not one more case. We have a few more cases. Says the Beitzah, Efroach Shenolad b'Yom Tov asur, which is what Rav said, right? that a chick that hatches in Yom Tov is asur. Says Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, af b'chol asur. You can't eat a chick even during the week. If an egg cracks open and the chick pops out of it, you're not allowed to eat that chick, even with shchita. Why? Because it hasn't yet opened its eyes. When a chick comes out, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this, but they have these chick cams, right? When a chick comes out of the egg, it hasn't yet opened its eyes, literally, but also meaning it's not ready to be its own person yet. It still needs the mother to sit on top of it and protect it, and then, maybe a few minutes or even a few hours pass before it, quote unquote, opens its eyes. And in that time period, says it's a very interesting rule, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, it's not considered an animal yet. It's still considered what he calls a sheretz, right? Which just gives you a tremendous insight into how they viewed shratim, right? Which I don't think is biologically accurate. But, they viewed shratim as being sort of pseudo, going from the dirt into life, kind of, and it's on that pathway. And that, in fact, is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion, who says, Kiman Asla Hadatanya, what is the following Beitzah, which quotes, it says in the Torah, the Kol HaSheretz HaSheretz Al Haaretz, right, which is Marbeh, all shratim that creep on the land. What is that including? Says the Beitzah, L'Ravot Efrochim Shlo Nitpatchu Eineihem. That includes chicks that have not yet opened their eyes, that they're considered to be, shratim. Again, but once they open their eyes, they're not. 6 hours later, they're no longer a sheretz. But that's how they viewed it, as there's like basal, they had different layers of biology, I guess. There are things that have less, I wouldn't say humanity, but less, life in them. And that's why shratim are prohibited, and a chick that's born is still the level of a sheretz until it opens its eyes. Anyways, that's a very side point. That's Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Now, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav, this is the last statement that we're going to analyze for today. Says Rav Huna Amar Rav, a Beitzah im yetziata nigmara. An egg is finished. And when does an egg become an egg, right? Now, I've never seen the inside of a chicken when it's growing. I don't think anyone has, right? But you would imagine that it's a complex process going from, no egg to complete egg, right? So the chicken starts building some kind of membrane that's soft. Within that membrane, the white, I think the yolk shows up first. It gets, more mature and harder as time goes on. We're going to see, I think, tomorrow that in that first stage, the egg basically is still attached to the gidim, to the sinews and the muscles of the mother. So it's essentially like a pimple almost, like popping off of some of the muscle. And that might be prohibited, right, at that stage. But then over time, of course, the egg develops and matures. It becomes its own thing. But says Rav Huna Amar Rav, a Beitzah is only considered a Beitzah when it gets into the air of the world, when it leaves the mother, leaves the chick. Until then, it's not a Beitzah. It's not an egg. Now, l'may nafka mina, who cares, right? Says the Gemara, my im yetziata nigmara. Well, for what implication is it finished when it comes out? So maybe what you're telling me is, of course, one of the fundamental issues about eggs is that when you're a piece of a chicken, you're fleishing. And when you're an egg, you're not, right? So maybe that's what it's telling you, is that if you check the chicken and there's a partially finished egg inside of there, you can't eat that with milk because it's meat, right? So once it's hatched, or not hatched, once it's laid, it becomes an egg and you can eat it with milk, right? You can make an omelet. So maybe that it's an egg and you can eat it with milk, which would imply that that when it's in the stomach, as the kids put it, right, of the mother, that if you chef the chicken and you find eggs inside of it, you can't eat them with milk. But that's not true. Hatanya, we learned clearly in the Beitzah, so you chef the chicken, you find completed eggs. Now, again, it's not clear from this sugya yet what beitzim gemura, what is completed meaning, as opposed to uncompleted. But clearly, they're still inside the mother, and still it's mutarat l'chon b'chalav. You can eat them with milk. They're not considered part of the chicken. So clearly, it's not yitziyah, it's not leaving the mother that makes it into an egg for this purpose. So maybe what you mean is the following: what you're saying is, you can eat it on Yom Tov, right? Because if you paskin like Shmuel, right, not paskin Shmuel, take it back. If you hold that, remember, an egg that was laid on Yom Tov you can't eat, but let's say it's laid 5 minutes before Yom Tov, right? So the egg left the mother before Yom Tov, it's muchan, and you're allowed to eat that egg on Yom Tov. Again, not as long as it's not laid on Yom Tov. Implying that if the egg was inside the mother, meaning you shechted a mother bird on Yom Tov, and you found an egg, that you can't eat that egg on Yom Tov because it's not muchan, right? So is that true? Is that true? You're implying that if it was in the stomach of the mother when you shechted her, you could not eat an egg on Yom Tov. Hatanya, but we learned in the Beitzah, which we quoted on Daf Bet, Hashochet tatarnegola, if you shecht a chicken, umatzada beitzim gemurot, and you find completed full eggs, mutarot lachlam b'yom tov. You're allowed to eat them. It's like a part of the mother. You can eat them on Yom Tov. So again, what's the practical application of Rav Huna Marav's rule that an egg is considered to be an egg when it leaves the mother? Says, well, maybe he disagrees. Maybe in fact, the Beitzah, which says you can eat an egg, is wrong. And the Beitzah is saying a halacha that you can eat an egg, and our Mishnah disagrees, and Rav Huna Marav is explaining that our Mishnah disagrees, right? But that can't be the case. Because if you read our Mishnah closely, you'll find that it doesn't make any sense. Anami Tanina. Now we're quoting our first Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Beitzah shenolda b'yom tov, an egg that's born on Yom Tov, laid on Yom Tov. Beit Shammai says you can eat it, but Beit Hillel says you can't eat it. But Ad Kan lo pligi Beit Shammai Beit Hillel, they're only arguing if it was laid on Yom Tov, Ela b'shenolda. Avumei iman, but presumably if it was in the mother, meaning you shechted the mother and you found an egg, divrei hakol sharyan. Everyone would agree it's mutter. Beit Hillel only said you can't have it because it's laid, because it's a new thing. Well, how do you know that? Maybe the Chidei Beit Hillel maybe Beit Hillel would say that an egg is prohibited whether it was laid, or whether it was in the mother. Now it seems like a much bigger chiddush to say it's prohibited in the mother, right? Because it's a much bigger chiddush to say it's prohibited in the mother because it's not a new thing. So why didn't Beit Hillel tell me that, right? The Chidei Ha'adiktani Nolda. Why did Beit Hillel why did the Mishnah talk about a case where it was already laid? That's tell you the chiddush of Beit Shammai, right? That even dafilu nolda na misharu, right? Had you just talked in the Mishnah about an egg inside a mother, you might have thought that Beit Shammai says you can eat it because you can eat the mother, so you can eat the egg. It's part of her. But if it was if it was laid, you can't eat the egg. So that's why we said a case where Beitzah nolda. But maybe Beit Hillel would in fact argue, and like Rav Yehuda Marav wants him to say, Rav Huna Marav, I keep saying, Rav Huna Marav wanted to say, and Beit Hillel would say that you can't eat an egg whether it was laid on Yom Tov or whether it's inside the mother. Maybe that's the case, but if that's true, then how do you explain the following Beitzah? Ela haditanya. How do you explain the following Beitzah? It says, Hashochet et tarnagola, you shecht a chicken, umatzah ba beitzim gemurot, and you find on the first day of Yom Tov, you find eggs inside of it. Mutarot lochlan b'Yom Tov. You can eat them on Yom Tov. Now I don't understand. Money. Lo Beit Shammai, the lo Beit Hillel. That's not going according to Beit Shammai or Beit Hillel, because Beit Shammai says you can even eat an egg that's laid on Yom Tov. You don't need to shech the mother and find it inside the mother. And according to you, you're saying Beit Hillel would say that's prohibited. If that's the case, no one says that you can only eat an egg that was inside a mother. The fact is, you must be wrong. And then, in fact, Beit Hillel must admit that you can't eat an egg that's laid on Yom Tov, but you can eat an egg inside a mother that was shechted on Yom Tov. In which case, why are you telling me that it doesn't become an egg until it comes out of the mother, right? So what's the chiddush then? Ella says the Gemara, this is what we mean to say. Im yitziata nigmira, that once a egg is laid, it's considered to be a mature egg. And migadelet efrochim. And now it can grow, whatever they call it, efrochim, chicks, right? They can grow chicks. But b'me'ei ima, if you take an egg outside of a mother, even if you hatch something from that egg, or even if there is an egg inside of there, eino migadelet efrochim, it will never raise chicks, meaning it wasn't mature enough that what will come out of that will be a living thing. And so basically they look very similar, right? One egg was about to be laid, but 3 hours before the hen was going to lay the egg, you shechted it to eat it. You take the egg out and it looks like a regular egg. Again, I don't know if this actually exists, but presumably right before a hen lays an egg, it's an egg, right? So you can find an egg. You can't visually tell the difference. Says Rav Huna Marav, if it didn't make it out of the mother, it didn't mature properly, right? It's like a preemie egg. And if it's a preemie egg, it's not going to ever grow into a chick. Doesn't matter, who cares, right? Tastes good. Well, for business, right? Because if you say to someone, right, I'm going to sell you an egg that to raise chicks, so you have to know why you're selling the egg. There was in fact a case where a person went to the store on Erev Rosh Hashanah maybe, and he said, Baya de Pachia Leman Yavale. Leman. Sorry, who is selling eggs that come from chickens that were born, right? Pachia just means they were born, right? And instead, Yavale Bei de Shchuta. The guy gave him a dozen eggs from animals that were shechted. So they tricked him. Can't tell the difference. After the Kamei de Rav Ami, he came to front of Rav Ami and said, look, I got cheated. Amar Louis said, you're right. Mekach ta'otu v'hadar. Of course, you were cheated. You got to give it back. They got to pay you back. You were pshita. That's obvious. I walked in there and I said, I want eggs type A, and he gave me egg B. Of course you have to pay it back. What are you telling me? Well, no, not necessarily. Because ma'adatema, I would have thought to say that high la'achila kaba'ilahu, that really, why do people buy eggs? Because they want to eat the eggs, right? So what do I care if it's going to turn into a chick or not turn into a chick? I'm buying the egg when it's long before that, right? High la'achila kaba'ilahu, and so then why did I care? If I'm going to eat the egg anyways, why did I say, can you give me an egg that had to do, that came from a chicken that laid it? The reason might be is because they're better tasted. Maybe they are a little bit more mature. They taste better. They cook better. They make better omelets. And says, and it would tell you the difference in paying in between. Meaning, if I go to a store, this is a very interesting halacha. If I went to a store and I basically said to the butcher in the store, I want a grade A steak, okay? And they give you a grade B steak. And you go home and you go back to the store and you say, I got a grade B steak, I want a grade A steak. Now, halacha might be, this is very complicated. Halacha might be that they don't have to give you back the steak. They don't have to give you back your money. They have to give you back the cost difference, right? If the grade A steak costs you $10 a pound, and this one costs $5 a pound, they have to give you back the money that they cheated you. But since you bought steak, you got a steak, they don't reverse the whole deal, right? Again, steak might not be a good example because people might say those are totally different things, right? But the question then is an egg that comes from an animal, a chicken that was laid, or an egg that was found inside a chicken, how different are those in quality, right? Certainly they're different in price. And if I charge you for the more expensive egg, I got to give you back the money. But just because I have to give you back some money doesn't mean that the deal goes back. What Rav Huna Amarav was saying is that you have to go back on the whole deal. Meaning, an egg that's laid is not the same as an egg that's inside a chicken. And if I go in and say, I want eggs that are laid, and you give me eggs from a chicken that was shechted, you gave me something totally different. It's not a different quality egg. It's not an egg. And therefore, the deal goes back. So that's the implication. It's for business, but not for any other purpose. And that's all he was saying in that halacha. We will stop here. And I think David Schwartz is teaching tomorrow an hour before Mincha. I hope those who make it can make it. I wish you a k'tiva v'chatima tova. Everyone, a shana tova.
Shana tova u'metuka, k'tiva v'chatima tova. All good things in the year to come.
Yes.
All good things. Hopefully learning in person at some point.
Yes, thank you,
More
Eli.
More of it. Thank you, Eli.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all your efforts. It's really appreciated.
My joy. Thanks for learning.
Bye.
Take care.
Miriam, Shana Tova.
Shana tova.